My question is about this pathway to happiness. When I started many years ago, I read some books in regards to mindfulness. And at some point, I don't know if it was mind or intuition, I found out that I was not my thoughts. I found out, okay, thoughts is one thing and I'm another thing. I can be apart from my thoughts. And then later on, I thought there must be more into it. I started watching YouTube videos and I found out, oh, there's something called consciousness awareness. What can be aware awareness? Who can, and after studying it, I found out again that it was only awareness that could be aware of awareness. And by coming here today, it seems to me like the last step on the way is to ask, who am I? Or who is aware? Or am I aware? And my question is more, what part do the mind play and the intuition play in this questioning? I can understand it's not like doing push-ups. If you do 30 and you do 35, it's better. It's more, it's quality more than the quantity.
The mind asks the question, who am I, or am I aware? Because that is a thought. So the mind asks the question, pause, and then there's the response, yes. The response yes is again your mind. It is a thought. So these two appearances of mind, these two thoughts, am I aware? Pause, yes. The question and the formulation of the question and the answer are thoughts, that is the mind. But in between those two thoughts is the experience to which the thought yes refers. And that is the real answer to the question. It's not in the mind, or rather it is the essence of the mind.
Okay, so like a combination. So it's asking you and just sitting with the question and sees what comes up.
Well, nothing comes up, because if it comes up, it is more of the mind.
Yeah.
It's what happens in between two objects of mind, in between two thoughts or between two feelings. In between King Lear's thoughts and feelings, who is he?
Still John Smith.
He's John Smith, because all King Lear is are thoughts and feelings. So in between two thoughts and feelings, there is no King Lear. So it is King Lear who asks the question, am I aware? It is King Lear that answers the question, yes. But the experience to which the answer yes refers is not an experience that King Lear has. It is John Smith's knowledge of himself. So when you ask the question, am I aware, or who am I? That is the mind that asks that question. In the pause between the question and the answer, the mind is divested of all its limitations, and its essence, your consciousness, shines. As a result of that shining, the mind then rises again and says, yes.
Okay. Is there any other, is that the essential questions, or are there anything, other questions you can ask to help on the way? Is there
the most direct question I know is the question, am I aware? Because in order to answer that question, you have to go to one experience alone, the experience of being aware. And I don't know of any more efficient or direct question. Even the question, who am I, doesn't necessarily take us directly to our essential self. It might take some people to their essential self, but because people are confused about who they are, it is also possible that the question, who am I, might take you to your thoughts, or your feelings, your activities, your relationships, your history. In time, if you stayed with that question, discarding all of these things one by one, it would eventually take you to yourself. So it's a perfectly valid question. Likewise, the question, what is it that never leaves me? Is a perfectly valid question. It's not quite as efficient or direct as the question, am I aware? Because one might be tempted, in fact most people would be tempted to begin with to say, well, my body never leaves me, I am always my body. And then you would have to reason with such a person, well actually your body is only experienced as a flow of sensations and perceptions, and no sensation or perception is always with you. So although you imagine that your body is always with you, actually it's not true. Your body is not always with you as an experience. And then the person will say, oh yes, of course, my body's not always with me, my thoughts are not always with me, my feelings are not always. What is always with me? But in this way, the question would take them gradually to the same place that the who am I or the am I aware question takes you, but not quite so efficiently. But it doesn't matter too much how efficient the question is, whether it takes 2 moments or 2 minutes. All of these questions will take us pretty directly to our true nature. The question, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? So it's another such question. So I wouldn't look for the ideal question. I would look for the question that means something to you, that is interesting to you. Don't just, and I don't mean to imply that you are, but don't just choose the best question and then just mechanically use it all the time. The question, am I aware, may be the best question today, but tomorrow it may not be efficient. You may have worn it out through overuse, and then you might ask yourself, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? Or what is it that never leaves me? So use whichever question is most interesting and most efficient for you at any particular moment.
I'd like to check out my experience of awareness and my understanding of my personal tendencies with it. So over the years and the different paths that I've been on, there are people who have a more vibrant inner life just by nature. They feel more, they experience more internally, and I'm not one of those people. I have a very quiet inner life, much more engaged externally. So when I go to awareness, this is kind of another version of the void experience we heard about a little bit earlier. My experience of awareness is infinite, certainly, without lack, certainly, but I wouldn't give it attributes of, and I know happiness is just a placeholder, right? I wouldn't even give it attributes of peace, because that implies a particular feeling. And it's actually quite a feeling-less state when I go to awareness. I don't have, that's okay with me, as long as that's okay, okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm okay being there, and it's a good place to be, and it informs my world, and it helps me engage in my life better. Over the years, I've had a few handfuls of experience with awareness that have been rich and profoundly peaceful and profoundly unified. There was only one experience, and it was me, and there was nothing else. And so the way that I'm kind of putting this together is that the one experience that I have is only one experience, but it's kind of like the volume of a good set of speakers. Sometimes the volume is down, and sometimes the volume is up. In my particular experience, it's mostly quite quiet. It's still there. I can access it anytime I want. It's consistent, it's right there for me, but it's usually not one that I would, again, apply these attributes of happiness or peace to. It's just that still, silent completeness. So I guess I would like
Yes.
your feedback on that.
The reason we describe awareness as being innately peaceful and happy is in reference to the previous agitation and sense of lack. So if you have previously been very agitated and you trace your way back to yourself and you find no agitation in yourself, in contrast to the previous agitation, we call the nature of ourself peace. Likewise, previously there was a sense of lack. In other words, we were suffering and we were constantly trying to fulfill our sense of lack in the world. We trace our way back to ourselves, and when we, so to speak, get to ourselves, we find no sense of lack there. So the word we use to describe the absence of the sense of lack is happiness. So the words peace and happiness are only used in reference to the previous agitation and lack. Once you are accustomed to abiding in your true nature, and the agitation and the sense of lack is no longer experienced, or very rarely experienced, they are no longer there in your experience to contrast your current experience. And then it is no longer necessary to refer to yourself as being inherently peaceful or happy.
As not that it's other than awareness, but I do occasionally, rarely, but occasionally, have a more intense experience of that place. How does that work?
That would be an example of Walter Kear's comment that I mentioned a few days ago, where happiness is peace in motion and peace is happiness at rest. This would be, if you allow me to use the word peace to describe the normal experience of being aware, but
Okay.
more neutral.
Okay.
That this nice phrase that Walter Kear used, happiness is peace in motion. When that experience bubbles up, so to speak, it's, or in your language, when the volume goes up, it is experienced as happiness. But in fact, even that is only said in reference to your objective experience, because the experience of being aware is always the same experience. The volume never really goes up or down. It's never really more or less intense.
So if awareness is infinite, using the metaphor of the river, it seems to me that we might have a surface level touch or a deeper level touch with awareness. If it's infinite and expansive, then might we not have different experiences of the intensity or volume of the awareness itself?
The fact of being aware is always the same experience. There are no degrees of being aware. There are only degrees of what we are aware of. So the difference in intensity that you're referring to, I think, is a difference in the intensity of the effect that your knowledge of yourself has on your body and your mind. And that gives rise to a varying degree of emotion. You may feel a heightened emotion at some stage compared to your normal, rather neutral state. But this is not a heightened experience of being aware. It's a heightened effect of the fact of being aware on your body-mind. So it is your emotion, your feeling that is heightened. It's not the fact of being aware that is heightened.
So it really is just this constant, most familiar, most normal,
Yeah.
most...
Yeah, and it never evolves. It has no degrees of intensity. It's like the sun. It just always shines with the same brightness.
Okay.
We could legitimately say there are various degrees of the veiling of our true nature, but depending on the opacity of our thoughts and feelings, And therefore, as we approach our true nature, as the opacity of our thoughts and feelings begins to fade, we may feel that our true nature is getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Just as when the clouds begins to disperse, we feel that it gets brighter. No, the sun doesn't really get brighter, right, although it seems to. So it could be that that's another. I still think my first suggestion is probably the correct one in your case, but it could also be that you are actually seeing yourself more and more clearly. But I don't think that's the case, because I get the feeling that when you say you have the experience of being aware, that's just the full experience of being aware. I think it's the effect, particularly if you tend to be a rather quiet person on the inside, with not a lot of intensity of emotion, that at sometimes the impact of being knowingly the presence of awareness reverberates in your body and your mind, and there is a heightened emotion of happiness or joy. It's not a heightened experience of awareness.
That does it. Thank you.
Pay attention to yourself. Yourself or the self, because when you go to yourself, you'll find yourself shares none of the limitations of your thoughts, feelings, etc. The self, the feeling of being. Just know yourself as that. Know yourself more and more deeply as that. Allow that understanding to pervade your experience. And sooner or later you'll just completely forget about whether there's a doer or a thinker or a feeler or a lover or a decider or anything. It's because your knowledge of yourself will be so present in your experience. Cultivate your desire to know who you truly are, because your knowledge of anything or everything depends upon your knowledge of yourself. There is no knowledge that is more important than the knowledge of yourself. Everything you know appears in relation to and as an extension of your knowledge of yourself. So yes, be passionately interested in what you mean by the word myself or me or I. Yes. And that might, some people are more investigative, perhaps more intellectual, and they may investigate that rationally, whereas for other people they feel that same interest, but they would never formulate it in that way. I want to know the nature of myself. They formulate it in a different way. I long to be happy. It's exactly the same. The desire to investigate oneself and the longing for happiness are exactly the same desire, formulated in two different ways.
But simultaneously, I think it seems like, from your previous comments, something about letting go of concepts of surrender or acceptance.
I don't recommend letting go of them, because that's artificial. And usually when you let go of them, if you haven't fully understood the idea will come back to you. So letting go of it is not enough. You have to understand what is meant. For instance, going back to our previous, what is meant by prayer or devotion. You cannot discipline yourself to stop devoting yourself to an external God until you've understood and felt that God lies at the very heart of yourself, not at a distance from yourself. That understanding will take care of the old habit of devoting yourself to an external God. Disciplining yourself not to do so, it may work for a few days, but the old habit will keep coming back.
It's sort of just more of the same.
Yeah, so don't. This is a way of understanding. It's not a way of discipline or effort. Now, you may have to make an effort to understand yourself, in which case make an effort. But make sure you make the right effort. Not an effort to discipline your mind or curtail your desires. Right. Make the effort to know clearly who you are. That is an effort that is worth making. Rather than the effort to drop the idea of surrender, or curtail your desires, or
Right.
detach yourself from such and such, or not do a certain
Disciplines.
thing. Yes, to think of this more of a way as, it's a way of understanding.
Yes.
And that understanding may bring some effort, or even what appears from the outside to be discipline. But it's not really effort and discipline in the conventional self. It's
That
love.
sounds like a huge relief.
It's love of the truth.
Mm.
If somebody is passionate about music, and they love music, and they love playing music, and they're learning an instrument, and they want to go deeper and deeper and deeper into playing the instrument, and to refine their skills and their techniques and their understanding of music, and they play 2 or 3 hours a day. From the outside, you'll think, oh, that person is so disciplined. But the person on the inside, they won't feel that they are disciplined. They're not disciplining themselves. They are just following their love of music. So what appears as discipline on the outside is really love on the inside, unless you are indeed imposing a practice on yourself from the outside. That would be a mechanical discipline, but don't
Well, that's what
don't
I'm
do
realizing. That. I'm realizing that I bring a certain amount of Puritanism to my...
No. Well, okay, so that has served you well thus far. It's brought you to this understanding, but now abandon it.
Yes.
Now go the way of understanding. As you are already, you're in love with the truth. You have this deep interest in the truth. Follow that. And if that requires some effort in order to trace your way back to yourself, or in order to realign the way you feel and perceive with this understanding, then make the effort from that place, from your love and interest in the truth. Don't impose it on yourself as a discipline. This is a way where the separate self sneaks back in through the back door and perpetuates itself by trying to get rid of itself. There are only 2 types of desire. Some desires come from happiness, and some desires go towards happiness. All desires fall into one of those 2 categories. The kind of desire that comes from happiness would be a desire, for instance, you feel totally at ease, at peace, complete, full, and you desire to have an intimate relationship in order to share that feeling of fullness or peace or love. That would be a desire that comes from happiness. You're not desiring the intimate relationship in order to become happy or in order to find love. On the contrary, you have already found that in yourself, but it's natural. Happiness is always seeking to share itself. So it is natural to have this impulse to share your happiness in relationship, or in another person it may be more to express that happiness through some kind of creative endeavor. These would be examples of desires that come from happiness, and those desires I recommend you just follow them to your heart's content. There is another kind of desire that comes from the sense of lack. I am incomplete, I'm lonely. And that desire propels us towards, out into the world, towards objects, either substances, activities, states of mind and relationships, object. That's the range of possibilities. So if you find yourself feeling that something is missing and going towards a substance or towards a relationship with the purpose of fulfilling yourself or becoming whole again, then I recommend postponing the gratification of that desire in the objective realm of experience and turning around, so to speak, and investigating who is the self that is unhappy. And in this way you'll never find that self, but in the search for that self, you will find your true self. And you will return to your native happiness. Then you may still have a desire for a particular activity or relationship, and then you can go back out towards it. But you no longer desire that object or relationship for the purpose of finding happiness, but rather for expressing and sharing it.
Beautiful. And
Because if you do, just say one more thing about that, particularly in terms of relationships, if you do approach a relationship, particularly an intimate relationship, with a view of finding happiness, then even if you start a relationship with someone, that relationship will start off on the wrong footing, and it will almost certainly, after the initial excitement of the relationship begins to die down, the seed of the separate self, which initiated the relationship in the first place, will begin to show itself in the form of conflict.
you said the other day that it is love, is our love for the truth. It's that actually gives birth to even all of those fearful or greedy.
Yes, it's right. Ultimately, all our desires come from love or come from happiness. And it's only when this desire coming from love is filtered through the belief in separation that it's as if this love is fragmented through the prism of the finite mind. And it is only then that this love turns into need for an object or relationship. But as long as the love or the happiness is not filtered through the sense of separation, then you should just allow it to express itself in life.